It looks like it's 9 o'clock here to me. Is that close to you, Judge?
Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. So you want to start?
So I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, call the roll. Mrs. Shumway?
Here.
Mr. Warndorf? Here. Mr. Gertz? Here. First item of business on the agenda, we have Keith McClintock with us from Western Reserve Land Conservancy. Western Reserve Land Conservancy has partnered with us on a number of land acquisitions and given us the opportunity to preserve some different lands around the county. So with a newer board in some regards, Western Reserve, Keith and I had talked about some potential land considerations around the county, and we want Keith to come and present a little bit about Western Reserve, about himself, what the organization does, and he's fortunate that he lives like 3 minutes from here. So, Keith, we'll turn it over to you. I've got a microphone if you need it.
Wonderful. I'll try to speak loud enough to avoid having to use that.
Welcome, Keith.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I was going to say, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. And I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you this morning. It's great to see so many friends and happy faces. A bit of nostalgia coming up a long way this morning. Having done that for 13 years, it's great to be back and being able to present what we do at the Western Reserve Land Conservancy in efforts to help preserve land across our region. The mission at run into a wall here. The mission at Western Reserve Land Conservancy is to protect those natural places that help to support vibrant and prosperous communities. We identify properties for protection, restore them, steward those areas, and try to protect them for clean water, working farms, natural areas for wildlife, and for parks. We are a 501c3. We're a nonprofit organization that works with individual landowners and with conservation partners in an effort to sustain and to meet this mission. The service area that we work in is rather large. On the west, we work all the way over in the Sandusky area, the Lake Erie Islands, where we've done several projects, all the way across the coast of Lake Erie to the Pennsylvania border. In fact, we're currently working on a piece of property up in the very northeast corner of the state. It's on the Pennsylvania border, right on the lake. And then as far south as Columbiana, Carroll, Stark, Wayne, and Ashland counties. So as you can see, it's a large area for us to cover, and it certainly does keep us running. If you look at the number of properties that we've helped to protect over the years, you can see that there's a concentration, a clustering of projects in the western portion of Geauga County and eastern portion of Cuyahoga County within the Chagrin River Basin. And that's because the Western Reserve Land Conservancy originally started as the Chagrin River Land Conservancy, where quite a bit of work was done back in the late 90s and into the early 2000s. To date, we've protected about 42,000 acres of land and 560 pieces of property. The Land Conservancy is a Western Reserve Land Conservancy is a result of a merger of land trusts that took place back in 2006 with the formation of the Chagrin River Land Conservancy with Friends Firelands Land Conservancy on the western side of the service area over in Erie, Huron, and Blaine County. Headwaters Land Trust, which was in Portage County and southern Geauga County, Hudson Land Conservancy, and the Medina Summit Land Conservancy, Portage Land Association, Conservation and Education Place, which covered the majority of Portage County, the very small Bracknell Land Conservancy right up on the lake, and the Tinkers Creek Land Conservancy, which went through Portage, Summit, and Cuyahoga counties. Since then, we've also merged with the Grand River Partners, which covers Lake, Geauga, and Ashtabula County, and with the Little Beaver Creek Land Foundation, which encompasses Columbiana County and parts of Carroll County. So why is it that we do the work that we do at Western Reserve Land Conservancy? We see that there is a significant need for land protection, and that our urban areas are being abandoned, and as a result, the people from the inner cities are moving to our rural areas within the suburbs. This is resulting in the net loss of agricultural soils and farmland in our open areas. And when we lose these natural areas, we have a decline in water quality, we have fewer people in the region, but more out in the countryside. And the one thing that's oftentimes overlooked is the cost of community services. The fact that it's putting a stress on our tax base. Residential development does not pay for itself, and it results in a net stress to local tax needs. And here we can see, basically for about a 35-year period, from 1976 to 2006, the amount of growth that the region has seen. As you look at 76, we have basically distinct urban areas. Cleveland, Akron, Canton, Youngstown, Warren, and even Mentor. However, in just that short period of time, 35 years, you can see where it's basically morphed into one large urban area, basically encompassing Cleveland, Akron, North Canton, and Canton into one large urban area. The only thing that's really saving that is the pocket of green there between Akron and Cleveland, which of course is the national park, as well as you can see that distinct emerald necklace from the Cleveland Metro Park. And that was all due to the foresight of some very creative thinkers back at the turn of the century. Same thing has happened in Geauga County. If we look at the 25-year period from 1975 to 2000, you can see that the impacts have hit us as well. Quite a bit of change in our development pattern in that short period of time. Bill, of course, you know, and Camden, seeing all the residential houses that are now lining virtually every street, and many of our farms have been lost to these developments. So how is it that we go about protecting land? First thing we do is to identify those key parcels, those pieces of property that have significant resources that are in need of protection. We then work through various legal instruments to protect the land, such as conservation easements, or through actual acquisitions of property when we work with our conservation partners. And then we look towards the stewardship of the property, in which we actually provide monitoring and protection services for that property into the future in perpetuity. So the basic land protection tools that we use are the donated or purchased conservation easement, and the primary tool there being the donated conservation easement. That makes up about 80% of the work that we do. There's purchasing land for public entities when we partner with organizations like Geauga Park District, any of the metro parks, local municipalities and townships. And then a small portion of the work is through land donations. once again, as I mentioned, the primary tool that we use is the conservation easement, which is, a couple of essential points. They are voluntary legal agreements. That is basically between the landowner and the land conservancy. And these documents are highly customizable to meet the landowner's needs. If the landowner is a farmer and they want to retain rights to produce food through agricultural crops on the property and possibly even do some timber management, the conservation easement can be modified to allow for that. However, the primary limitation that's placed on the land as a result of the conservation easement is that it permanently limits most development and some of the uses on the property for the protection of conservation and agricultural values. And once again, these are permanent protection tools. These are easements that will be put in place and monitored and protected in perpetuity. The nice thing about it is the landowner retains title and possession of the property, and public access is not a requirement. That is, once again, the individual landowners at their discretion. They can reduce income and estate taxes in Geauga County. However, property taxes in Geauga County typically do not get reduced. The auditor has made a strong stand that if a piece of property has CAUV, he will not lower the taxes for that piece of property any lower. So as a result, whenever we place an easement on a piece of property, once again, that property stays on the tax base and it still continues to generate taxes like it always has. So in essence, what is happening is that we're creating these pockets of protection. And quite a bit of the work we do is in the agricultural landscape. So the idea there is to join these pockets of protection to create areas that will allow for the sustainable use of the land for agriculture. As we've seen here in Geauga County with the residential development like we have in Hammond, it's very difficult for farmers to stay in business. If you lose enough agriculture, you lose the support industry as well. And at that time, it's very difficult for the existing farmers that remain to stay in business. So as we look at Geauga County in and of itself, the Land Conservancy has worked to protect 18 privately owned farms, 59 privately held conservation easements, and we've worked to help protect 12 public parks and 19 public-owned preservations. And those have primarily been through partnership with Geauga Park District. Out of all the land that we have protected in the county, 62% of that is still in private ownership and is still on the tax record. A couple misconceptions. The Land Conservancy really does not look to own or manage land. Once again, that is left up to the individual landowners. If a conservation easement is placed on the property, or we look for takeout partners, such as our conservation partners as the Park District, local municipalities, local townships. And then we work with private buyers to transfer land from a willing seller to a buyer, and then placing an easement on the property and conserving the land in the process. I want to run through several examples of how we work with our partners and the benefits that we can have in helping to save those partners money. First one is work that we did in 2013 with Cleveland Metro Parks. We purchased a piece of property in Solon, known as the Lambert property, and it is adjacent to the South Chagrin Reservation. In fact, it looks like a missing puzzle piece from the Cleveland Metro Parks Reservation there. As with Solon, property value is very high. It was a $1.5 million purchase. However, through a couple of years of diligent work, writing grant applications, funding applications, we were able to secure WRRSP funding, which is Water Resource Restoration Sponsorship funding, Clean Ohio, which is the Clean Ohio Conservation Fund, bond money that the state has available for preservation of land, as well as work with individual and private foundations, resulting in being able to raise 83% of that $1.5 million. So as a result, Cleveland Metro Parks was able to get a piece of property that's critical to the expansion of the South Chagrin Reservation for about 17 cents on the dollar. In Medina County, we've done quite a bit of work with Medina County Park District. First one example is the Harrison property that was acquired, 232 acres in 2010. It was a $1.435 million purchase. We were able to raise Clean Ohio funding, some in-kind dollars, which resulted in Medina County Park District only having to pay about 26 cents on the dollar for the acquisition. And then in 2013, we worked with them on the Rivendell property, which is now part of Medina Marsh. And then that example, we were able to raise 100% of the funds for the acquisition of that property through 3 different funding sources. And the NACA fund down there is the North American Waterfowl Conservation Act, some funding that is available with the assistance of duck submarine. Lorraine Metro Parks is another one of our great partners. The director at Lorraine Park District is a former Geauga Park District employee, Jim Zimnick. We've worked with them to preserve the Castle property in 2014 and the Royal Oaks property, 97-acre property in 2014. Both of these properties adjacent to existing metro parks, which allow them to expand and actually connect out some parks. On the first one with the Castle, basically able to raise 92% of the funds, so an 8% contribution was required from the Park District. And for Royal Oaks, we were able to raise 75% of the value. Some of our smaller park districts, once again, Ashtabula County Metro Parks, they did not have a levy until last year, so they had very limited funding, as well as Mill Creeks, which have been in some financial situations where they really do not have a budget for land acquisition. In both of these cases, we were able to work with these park districts to secure a couple of pieces of property that they really desired for protection and for public access for park visitors. The first one in Ashtabula being Lamson Lake, where we were able to raise not only the funds to acquire the property, but also to do a restoration of the failing dam at the Lamson Lake Reservoir. And then Mill Creek, we were able to purchase the Matsourus property through working out a bargain sale with the owner, where he actually gave up some value of his property and then using Clean Ohio to pay for the balance. Of course, in Geauga Park District, a couple of prime examples. The first one was the Barton property. It was 87 acres. In 2010, it came up for sale. And this has been referred to as the Little Grand Canyon of Burton. It was one of those pieces of property that in one of the early reports to the Park District, back over 50 years ago, was identified as one of the top 10 parcels in the county in need of preservation. At the time it came available, all but 2 of the properties on that list were acquired. Parkman Gorge being one, still in private ownership, and then the Barkman property. Problem was, when it became available, the heirs that inherited the property did not want to split the property. They wanted to sell it as one unit. It included agricultural land, and then the natural area, the wooded area that has this beautiful outcropping of the Sheriff conglomerate. Park District was not able to acquire the property at that time just because of the cost. It would have been nice if the Park District could have bought the property and sold the agricultural land to the neighboring farmer. However, Ohio revised code limits how park districts can dispose of property. And it would make it a very difficult and, quite frankly, place the park district at risk for that portion of the property. So at that time, I approached British Congress at Western Reserve Land Conservancy and said, what can you do for the park district to help preserve this piece of property? We know that a neighboring farmer wants to buy the agricultural land. However, he's in the same boat we're in, and that he cannot afford the entire property. He's only interested in the agricultural portion. So the Land Conservancy entered into a purchase and sale agreement with the sellers. They split the property, sold the agricultural land to the farmer, and then was able to put the remainder, the 60 acres property, to the park district, and were actually able to raise 50% of the funds. So not only was the park district able to secure the portion that they wanted, they were able to do so at a 50% reduction. Another piece of property was Heritage Acres, which is in Munson Township on the south side of Mayfield Road, just east of Auburn Road. And this was a 38-acre piece of property that the Land Conservancy was actually able to raise 100% of the funds for and transfer it to the park district. And that was able to be done through these economic development grants, as well as splitting the property and once again selling the prime agricultural land to a local farmer. And then the big acquisition, of course, is Orchard Hills. Probably one of the park district's most heavily used and widely visited parks. Back in 2009, 209 acres was offered to Western Reserve Land Conservancy and to the Park District. The Pattersons, who own the farm, actually had a development company have an offer on the table to buy the property for more than $3.35 million. It was a higher offer. And through working with Western Reserve Land Conservancy and partnering with the Park District, we're able to enter into a purchase and sale agreement and then able to raise funds from Clean Ohio Conservation Fund, the WRRSP program for both acquisition and restoration of property, a couple of environmental or economic development grants, some direct contributions from Rendell through the State House, the 319 grant through Ohio EPA, which resulted in the Land Conservancy being able to raise and secure 62% of the funds and close to $1 million towards the restoration of the property. So as a result, Park District was able to gain this incredible piece of property in Chesterland for basically 38% of its value. So how do we do this at Western Reserve Land Conservancy, and why is it that we have been so successful over the years? And it's primarily due to the result of the team that has been assembled over the years. We have 4 regional field directors that are actually out in the field meeting with landowners, talking about conservation options, meeting at kitchen tables, meeting out in agricultural fields. These are 4 individuals that just do an incredible job of being able to educate landowners on the work of the Land Conservancy. In some cases, conservation options are for the landowners. In other cases, it's not. Either way, at least we provided some education. We do have one acquisition specialist who has a real estate license, who's great at negotiating deals. We have a 3-person legal team. We have in-house legal. So whenever purchase and sale agreements or any kind of legal agreement is needed, we do not have to go to outside counsel and wait for that turnaround time. It's basically in-house and almost instantaneous. We have a full-time grant writer who is highly successful and very good at putting together these applications. Once again, when you write tens of these applications every year, you learn what the process is, you know what the grant funders are looking for, and it really gives us a leg up. We have 3 in-house project managers, so not only do we require when we work for a park district on an acquisition project, not only do we do the negotiating for the land deal and write the grant, we then actually project manage through the entire grant process, which saves the staff time and headaches for the park districts. We have 3 GIS and conservation planning specialists in-house for mapping needs. We have a 3-person stewardship team, which these are people that are on the ground. They're out visiting properties. Every one of the conservation easements and permanently protected properties is visited at least once a year with actual boots on the ground, and a report is written on an annual basis. We have 1 legislative affairs coordinator. So once again, when we feel that there's a piece of legislation that is critical towards securing our communities and preserving our land, we work hard to make sure those policies go through. We have a conservation coordinator and 1 administrator. So once again, this is the team of professionals that when someone comes in to the park district to partner on a project, they instantly get this full accounting of individuals working very diligently to help and protect land. So once again, success to date, we have over 560 properties protected within that region and close to 42,000 acres. If we look at the breakdown of that protected land, only 20% of that land, 8,400 acres, is publicly owned. And that's primarily publicly owned by local park districts. In some cases, it also includes municipalities and townships. However, 80% of that land protected is privately held. Once again, that is land that is still on the tax record, still producing local taxes, and providing peace of mind for the landowners, knowing that their property will not be developed in the future. And of that 80% of the 33,600 acres, 52.5% of it is actually agricultural land. So as you can see, we do quite a bit of work with protecting farmlands. I cannot emphasize enough, though, that one of the most valuable aspects of the work that we do is stewardship, the long-term care of those protected properties. Whenever someone enters into a conservation easement with the Land Conservancy, we do a baseline report. We do an inventory of the property, provide mapping, provide a report, which basically documents the existing conditions. It then sets forward the restrictions on that property and what can and cannot be done. And we make sure that the homeowners are very well educated on those aspects. And as a result, we keep in constant communication with them. Maintaining a good landowner relationship is key. And as I mentioned previously, we provide those annual visits to all properties. And if a landowner has a question, we're happy to go out and meet with them. Another unique aspect of the Land Conservancy provides is terra firma, which is a conservation defense insurance program that we place on every easement, which will help cover legal expenses if there's ever an enforcement issue or a legal action related to the conservation easements. The Land Conservancy has been taken to court in the past with people who try to break conservation easements, and very happy to say that we have a very high, everyone has been won. We currently are in the midst of an appeal on one that was previously ruled in favor of Western Reserve Land Conservancy.